Win big with new DRF All Access past performances. With one best-in-class product, you now get all three past performance formats. Go to DRF.com and use coupon code 1FREEPP for a free single card today.
Hi, everyone. This is Daily Racing Forum's Derby Watch. I'm Brad Free with David Aragona. David, great call 1 week ago, making Sierra Leone the Derby Watch favorite going into the Risen Star. Coming out of the Risen Star, I can now say I don't think you dropped his odds quite low enough last week.
Well, he felt like a horse that was picking up some steam coming into that race, and it turned out to be justified as he delivered a nice effort to win that race. And it did feel like going into last week, the Risen Star was going to answer some outstanding questions, and it does feel like we got some clarity as to how this Derby field is taking shape in February.
No doubt about it. Sierra Leone, we're going to talk about his win in the Risen Star Stakes. We'll also talk about the Sunland Derby and a 3-horse allowance race that was run last weekend at Fairgrounds. But let's first, at the start, take a look at the chart, the updated chart, and only one revision. And so far, there hasn't been a whole lot of turnover on this list. We dropped Hall of Fame for his poor performance in the Risen Star. We'll talk about that in just a minute. And we added Tuscan Sky. He's the horse who won that 3-horse allowance race that we will talk about. I kind of got the sense, David, over the last couple of weeks that we're all kind of waiting around for something to happen. And maybe something did happen last Saturday in the Risen Star at Fairgrounds.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're waiting for that breakout performance, a horse to really establish himself as the clear-cut favorite. Sierra Leone almost got there in the Risen Star because it didn't come back the fastest race, and I think we'll talk about that a little bit more. But I think a lot of people who understand pace situations really like what they saw from how he ran that day, and that's why he got bet down to be the 6-1 favorite in last week's Derby future wager. I think Pool 4 of that just closed with him being 6-1. I was a little more conservative than that, setting him as the 8-1 favorite over I think a trio of 12-1 shots. Dornock Locked, who has sort of been down and up and down on this Derby watch list so far, and Timberlake. But it does feel like Sierra Leone, at least at this early stage, is the established favorite.
Yeah, you dropped his odds from 12-1 a week ago to 8-1 coming out of the Risen Star. That looks like a good number to me. You also made a significant revision to the price for Locked, who you mentioned has kind of been all over the place. He's been a very difficult horse to read due to an interrupted race schedule, but you dropped him from 20-1 a week ago down to 12-1. Why the revision?
Yeah, I was sort of uncomfortable making him the favorite week 1. I revised that for week 2 when it seemed like there was uncertainty about when he would have a workout. He finally did have a workout last Friday, and it seemed like it was a very positive workout. He finished up very strongly, seemed to get something out of it, and it now sounds like suddenly he's back on track for the Fountain of Youth, and he's the kind of horse based on his 2-year-old resume that if he runs well there, he could be right back in the mix for the Kentucky Derby. So sort of split the difference between week 1 and week 2, and now have him 12-1.
12-1 for Locked, and then Tuscan Sky, the new addition to Derby Watch this list. He opens up at 25-1, and we'll talk about his win in just a minute. But let's start off by talking about the Risen Star. This is a race that had 5 horses listed on Derby Watch in the field. We thought it was a strong field going in, and I think that we saw a strong performance by the winner. David, what about you?
You had to like everything that you saw from Sierra Leone in this race. I know that there was some question as to why Chad Brown was running blinkers, bringing him back in a race going a mile and an eighth. Well, it all seemed to make sense after the performance because this horse was more forwardly placed than he was in the Remsen, didn't drop so far back in the early stages. And even though the pace was not particularly fast, it was probably closer to slow. He really did well to get into striking range in the top of the stretch and just mow that field down like a horse that's not going to have any problem handling the 10 furlongs of the Derby.
Let's take a look at the race chart of the Risen Star Stakes. This race was lengthened to a mile and 1/8 in 2020. That was the COVID year when the Derby was run in September. But the next 3 winners of the Risen Star, Mandaloon, Epicenter, and Angel of Empire, they all hit the board in the Kentucky Derby. And I wonder if that might just be coincidence, or it might be a product of this early season race. In February, you don't see too many races run at this mile and 1/8 distance. But David, the way that Sierra Leone rallied from behind and kind of won going away, it suggests that when we get out to a mile and 1/4 in May, he'll have no issue whatsoever.
Yeah, these Derby preps sort of go in and out of fashion depending on the year or the decade. And right now, it does seem like these Fairgrounds Derby preps are the trendy prep to start in. And it makes sense based on what you said. The distance progression, it really works for the Kentucky Derby. And Sierra Leone, he feels like a horse that's going to continue getting better with added ground. I mean, the way that he was able to pick up and finish this final eighth of a mile, just given the fact that the pace of this race never materialized the way a lot of people expected it to. I mean, 49 and 3.5, 114 and 3. I know it was not a particularly fast track by this point of the day at Fairgrounds with that sloppy sealed surface, but he really had to do some running in the final eighth to get there, and get there he did, and it just feels like a horse that's really going to relish that 1.25 mile distance.
His next start will be in the Bluegrass in April at Keeneland. The runner-up, Track Phantom, I thought he ran okay. I'm not so sure that 1 1/8 is his friend, and I don't know that he'll want any part of 1 3/16 when he shows up in the Louisiana Derby next month. And I would suspect he'll be one of the favorites in that race. Catching Freedom, I don't know. I was a little ambivalent on his chances going in, and I kind of the same way going out. Honor Marie finished fifth. David, you and I are both kind of going to give him a pass. I thought he ran okay. It was an okay fifth place horse finish by a horse who hadn't started in more than 3 months. What about Honor Marie?
Yeah, I thought Honor Marie was just never in a position to achieve success in this race. I mean, he was even 3 to 4 lengths behind Sierra Leone moving down the backstretch and into the far turn. And he just could never really get into the race given the way the pace worked out. He's a deep confirmed closer. And in a race where the pace doesn't develop, Honor Marie is going to have problems. Hopefully he gets a better pace situation next time out, because given him finishing fifth here, it feels like his next prep race is going to be critical. Whereas Sierra Leone and Track Phantom, they've already got the points to get into the Kentucky Derby. So it doesn't really matter how they do next time out, though I'm sure their connections would like to see good efforts from them in the Bluegrass and the Louisiana Derby, respectively.
The Risen Star first, second, third, and fifth place finishers stay on Derby Watch. A very disappointing performance by seventh place finisher, Hall of Fame. He's the second high-profile 3-year-old that we've seen this season who has been unable to reproduce his highly rated maiden win. The other one being Nash, who still hasn't run back to that giant figure. And the same thing with Hall of Fame. He took a step backward, and I think that trainer Steve Asmussen is going to regroup. So let's take a look at the past performances of the 4 Risen Star runners that we're going to keep on the list. David, you mentioned earlier that 90 Beyer speed figure by Sierra Leone, it's not the type of figure that makes you want to go out and buy a future book ticket, but it would have been nearly impossible under the circumstances for Sierra Leone to earn a good figure, correct?
Yeah, and I think you've got to keep some things in mind with regard to that 90 Beyer speed figure. It was a day that was just difficult to make speed figures in general with the wet track and the long nature of the card, 14 races. Hard to track how the track changed over the day from a speed and moisture content standpoint. And also the pace of this race, when they go 114 to the 6 furlong marker, nobody in the field is going to be capable of achieving a high speed figure, maybe except a horse like Flightline. So, I mean, it's understandable that these 3-year-olds making their first start of the season, like Sierra Leone is not going to run some huge speed figure. And I think that's probably just okay with trainers like Chad Brown and even Steve Asmussen on Track Phantom. Steve Asmussen's not the kind of runner not the kind of trainer, I should say, who's looking to empty the well in a prep race in February. He's just a progression to the Kentucky Derby to get these horses to peak in the Triple Crown season. So I'm not going to worry too much about the figure for this race.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about it either, but it is a factor and something that we will consider moving forward. Track Phantom, he set the pace. He was no match late. He did finish a length and a quarter clear, and I guess he'll be one of the favorites in the Louisiana Derby going 1 3/16. David, I have some reservations about Track Phantom, maybe premature, regarding how far he really wants to run based on his performances so far.
Yeah, I'm not really sure about his distance preferences, but I will say I respect this horse's consistency. He just shows up every time, and maybe he's not doing anything particularly flashy in his races, but he's just always in the mix. And we've seen Steve Asmussen runners like this in Derby years past, where the horses may not look like they're the best through the series of prep races, but they just keep getting better and better. And he's got a lot of attributes that are going to work very well in a race like the Kentucky Derby. He's a great gate horse. He can be on the lead or just off the pace, and we'll see if the distance works for him, but I'm not going to write off Track Phantom just yet.
Now, I wouldn't write off anybody quite yet. He is by Quality Road. One of the things that kind of strikes me looking at his past performances is his damn Miss Sunset was a very good sprinter out here in California. I can't overlook that. I mean, I wonder if he has distance limitations based on his dam. By Quality Road, he should run on, but we're going to find out more about him in the Louisiana Derby going 1 mile and 3/16. The third place finisher, he's a horse that I'm becoming less a fan of. I like him up to, say maybe 1 mile and 1/16. He strikes me as one of these closing miler types that tends to lose his punch in deep stretch. And he's also a little bit immature. I'm sure you'll agree.
Yeah, he's a horse who has shown greenness really from the start of his career and just doesn't seem to be getting over it. He was really awkward with his lead changes in the Smarty Jones 2-back, and we saw the same thing. He was hanging on his left lead at the end of the Risen Star, and you just want to see horses get over that and be more professional as they progress through the racing. And we're not necessarily seeing Catching Freedom take those mental steps forward, but if he ever does, he's a horse who does have that baseline of talent that maybe he could step up to the next level once he finally gets over that.
Well, he has 4 races under his belt, and his figures have virtually moved forward with each subsequent start. He paired 87s last time from the Smarty Jones to the Risen Star. So I might be premature in, dismissing Catching Freedom. I'm just not sure that he's a closer that wants more ground. Honor Marie, David, I thought his 5th place finish was a little bit better than the finish position might indicate. What's your take on Honor Marie?
Yeah, I mean, like I was saying before with regard to the chart, I mean, he was just so far out of position early. I mean, that's the way he runs. He's a deep closer. He's always going to be towards the back of the pack. But sometimes for those horses, the paces just don't work out, and you really can't hold the finishing position against him because their results are often so dependent on how those paces work out in front of them. And he was actually really trying at the end of that race. For his first start off a layoff going 1 mile and 1/8, he was really running through the wire. Obviously, never caught the top 3 finishers, but I liked what he did in the final 8th, and he's a horse that I'd be looking to give another shot to next time.
Yeah, I completely agree. I thought that it was a good, solid 80 buyer comeback prep for Honor Marie, and I think we both expect him to improve next time out, wherever that might be. So 5 Derby Watch listers in the Risen Star going in, 4 coming out. And let's turn our attention to an allowance race. This would have been a really cool race 3 on Saturday at Fairgrounds if everybody had stayed in. But there were 4 scratches, and we bet all the way. We whittled down to a field of only 3. Couple of pretty good ones finished 1-2, however.
Yeah, this was basically a match race because the third horse really was never involved in the race at any point, and it played out like a traditional match race where Nash went to the front, and I thought Luis Saez did a masterful job of trying to win the race with a horse that was in the chasing position, because Nash is the kind of horse that once he gets comfortable on the front end, that's when he's most dangerous, like when he broke his maiden. And Luis Saez on Tuscan Side just started pressing him on the backstretch, applying pressure around the far turn, and eventually was able to get past him. And it does feel like Tuscan Sky is the horse that wants a little more ground down the line. However, Tuscan Sky, both wins have been on wet tracks. Is he a horse that likes wet tracks? Is he a horse that doesn't like wet tracks? I think that's a question that we still have to answer about him. And also, even though this race came up fast, doing it against one rival in a basic match race is very different from running a fast speed figure in a derby prep with 12 horses.
No doubt about it. He earned a 95 buyer. Let's take a look at the race chart of that allowance, and you can see 3 horses. It was a virtual match race. The runner-up Nash finished more than 29 lengths clear of third. David, you brought up something that, this race was run over a wet track. So was the Risen Star. That's one of the complications that we're going to see moving forward. Mystic Dan, when he won the Southwest with a giant triple-digit figure, it was on a wet track. We've had, Tuscan Sky, both his starts have been on a wet track. You wonder in the back of your mind whether, that moisture in the track moves him up or whether he's just a good horse. I'm in the case of Tuscan Sky, I think most likely he's just a good horse, but we'll find out more about him if he does catch a fast track next time out. Nash is the horse we mentioned earlier. He earned that 94 buyer in his maiden win. His next 3 starts, really not that fast. Yeah, he earned a 91 the other day, but I will say Nash had advantageous conditions in that virtual match race, right?
Yeah, he got to the front end, got comfortable for about a half mile before some pressure started to be applied to him. And I think that's what we've seen from Nash in his last few starts. When he faces another good horse, he sort of doesn't have that heart to go on with it and battle for the victory. And we saw that again with Tuscan Sky. I wonder if that might be different in a shorter race, even though he had success breaking his maiden impressively around 2 turns. He's a horse that feels to me like he might be better in a 1 turn mile.
Well, I think you mentioned that in the very first Derby Watch video that we recorded this year, that his dam, Sarah Louise, was more of a 7/8 miler type. And you wonder if some of that, pedigree influence has gone on to Nash, who at this stage, he doesn't look like a Kentucky Derby type of horse. Doesn't mean he can't be a good horse, but maybe a mile and a quarter, perhaps out of reach. So Tuscan Sky and Nash, 95 buyer and 91 buyer. Tuscan Sky goes on to the Derby Watch list. Nash is a horse that we will continue to keep an eye on. Meanwhile, we would normally at this time of year, we would be talking about, which Bob Baffert 3-year-old has, going to give him another chance at the Kentucky Derby. But Churchill Downs has banned Baffert, which is unfortunate because Nisos, the best 3-year-old in California, maybe even in the country. Muth certainly would have been a worthy participant on the Kentucky Derby trail, and he still can be on the prep races. He just can't be in the Kentucky Derby. So there's only one California-based 3-year-old on Derby Watch so far, and he ran Sunday in New Mexico. Did we find out anything about Stronghold?
I mean, I think we saw Stronghold take another slight step forward from a speed figure standpoint to run a number in the high 80s, but we already saw last fall he was not in the same league as a horse like Nisos. Maybe none of the 3-year-olds out there are, but it was probably a wise move to collect some points at Sunland Park because it seems like Bob Baffert really has his bases covered in some of these California Derby preps. So it just moves Stronghold one step closer to actually qualifying for the Kentucky Derby, which we've talked about might be hard to do if you're not a Bob Baffert trainee racing in those Southern California prep races. However, I'm not sure really what he beat at Sunland Park, and I don't know that I've seen enough from him to suggest that he's really a legitimate contender for the Derby at this stage.
Yeah, I agree. Let's roll the tape of the stretch run of the Sunland Derby, and you'll see what David and I, kind of both agree on. That's Stronghold taking the lead on the outside, and I think a really good horse would have just run away from the field right here. And to Stronghold's credit, he won the race. He earned 20 Derby points. He earned $230,000 in cash, but watching him finish, within 3 lengths of the top 3 finishers, he stays on the list for now. He earned an 89 buyer speed figure. That's his career best. Truth of the matter is, David, he earned an 89, and we're kind of, dissing him a little bit. Whereas the winner of the Risen Star earned a 90, and all of a sudden he's the Derby favorite on speed figures. And I know there's a lot of other factors involved, pace, etc., class. On speed figures, there's not that much difference between Stronghold and Sierra Leone.
Yeah, it's true. Speed figures, though, as you know, Brad, they're not everything, and you want to see the horses step up against similar level of competition or tougher competition and actually defeat them. We saw Sierra Leone pass that major test in the Risen Star, even though the race did not come back as fast as maybe we hoped it would. Stronghold, he faced at least one decent horse in the Sunland Park Derby, Informed Patriot, who went off almost as the co-favorite, and that horse completely failed to show up with his good effort. So what did Stronghold really beat in earning that 89 buyer? I think those are questions that you do have to still hold with some importance.
No doubt about it. The Stronghold, the water is going to get a little deeper for him next time. Trainer Phil D'Amato has not yet determined where his next start will be, but it will be against a better field likely than he met in the Sunland Derby. He stays on the list. Stronghold does. In fact, I think he's ranked 4th on the Derby list, on the points standings list anyway. And David, you dropped his odds from 50 to 1 all the way down to 40 to 1. You comfortable with that?
Yeah, big move there. Really respecting that 89 buyer he got. For now, yes, we'll start to use a little more points as the morning line maker through the next few weeks, but it doesn't feel like he did enough to really move up this list meaningfully.
I agree. He stays on the list, but we're just we need to see a little bit more. The only other really serious Derby prep last week was the Hyacinth Stakes in Tokyo, and a horse by the name of Ramjet won the race. He moves to the top of the Japan Road to the Derby points leaderboard with 30 points. And his status for the Kentucky Derby will depend on the final Japan Road to the Kentucky Derby points race. That's on March 23rd, in which the winner earns 40 points and is virtually guaranteed to at least remain on top of the Japan leaderboard. The only Japanese horse that we have on the list right now is Forever Young. He runs this week in Saudi Arabia. We'll mention that in the preview section that is coming up after the conclusion of this video. So there's a look at Derby Watch, the updated Derby Watch, our third, and Sierra Leone, a relatively definitive favorite, I think, at odds of 8-1. David, let me just throw out a couple of real quick takeaways, then I'll ask you to wrap things up. Regarding Sierra Leone, I just wonder, I said earlier that we've been kind of waiting for something to happen, and something did happen, and Sierra Leone looked good in victory. I'm going to hold off on coronating him, the automatic Kentucky Derby winner right now. There's still one more prep race to go. The Derby is a long ways away, and there's really nothing to be gained by making a Derby selection in February. If I had to, he would be the one, but I'm going to try to keep an open mind with regards to Sierra Leone. We're going to give him a pass on the speed figure angle, but let's face it, his career top so far is a 91. I'm sure he's going to build on that. But the one thing that just kind of bothers me a little bit, I wonder, we talked about how deep and strong the Risen Star field was. Is it possible that maybe we have overrated, the likes of Track Phantom and Catching Freedom a little bit, and Sierra Leone, maybe he beat a field that was not quite as strong as we hoped or thought it would be? I guess we're going to find out with regards to Sierra Leone in the Bluegrass in early April, but at least for now, I'm going to temper my enthusiasm for the deserving early favorite for the Kentucky Derby and see what happens in the Bluegrass. Also looking forward to a pretty big race this weekend at Oaklawn Park. David, how about you?
Yeah, I think those are all fair takeaways. I mean, the only counter to that I would say is, who are we maybe overrating him against? Because we haven't really seen a new face emerge that's run a fast figure against legitimate competition. And sort of my takeaway, looking at the Derby Watch, even in this third week of doing it, is a lot of the horses towards the top of our list were the accomplished 2-year-olds from last season, the horses that ran in the Breeders' Cup or the Remsen, and they've yet to really be usurped. And we'll see if that changes over the next few weeks.
Yeah, no doubt about it. There's still a lot of time to go before the Kentucky Derby. That is a wrap for Derby Watch Recap. Sierra Leone, his February bandwagon is filling up. We hope that you join David and I for the Derby Watch preview. That's coming up next with an early look at the Rebel Stakes. For David Aragona, I'm Brad Free. See you next time.